Harlem didn't breathe that night. It listened. The Cotton Club was alive in the way only danger and glamour could coexist. Crystal glasses clinked, cigarette smoke curled beneath golden lights, and the band pushed its horns hard while dancers moved like the night would never end. Illegal whiskey flowed freely, loosening tongues and egos as wealthy white patrons from downtown sat shoulder to shoulder with politicians, gangsters, and celebrities who all believed the club was neutral ground. But neutrality is fragile, and on Monday night, the 16th of September 1935, it shattered. Near the back of the room, almost forgotten by the noise and movement, sat Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. He was alone, dressed sharp but modest, nursing a bourbon he hadn't touched in several minutes. His eyes stayed on the stage, not the dancers, but the room itself, absorbing everything. Bumpy had survived long enough to know that power rarely announced itself loudly. He didn't talk much, didn't boast, didn't need to. Harlem knew who he was. Then Dutch Schultz stood up. The movement alone shifted the air. Schultz was drunk, not stumbling drunk, but the dangerous kind, fueled by expensive liquor and unchecked confidence. His face was flushed, his jaw tight, anger simmering just beneath his grin. He didn't stroll. He stomped, cutting across the club with entitlement written into every step. His bodyguards scrambled after him, but they already knew this wasn't a situation they could. Conversations faded. Heads turned. Even the band began to lose rhythm as people sensed something ugly coming. Schultz reached Bumpy's table and slammed his hand down so hard the bourbon glass jumped, spilling onto the table. His voice exploded through the club, loud enough to silence the music entirely. What followed wasn't business talk or negotiation. It was venom. Racist insults poured out unchecked. Words meant to strip a man of dignity in front of witnesses. Schultz mocked Harlem, mocked Bumpy's power, mocked the very idea that a black man could stand equal to him. In 1935, racism was common, but this was different. This was deliberate humiliation, performed like theater. 200 people froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Even those who despised Bumpy felt the weight of the moment. Schultz was crossing a line so openly that it made everyone uncomfortable. Bumpy Johnson didn't flinch. He didn't stand. He didn't reach for the .45 he carried. He didn't react at all. He simply looked up, calm, expressionless, letting Schultz empty himself. When the shouting finally stopped, when the silence became unbearable, Bumpy spoke. His voice was low, steady, almost gentle, but it cut deeper than any scream. "You got 7 days to get your people out of Harlem. After that, any white man I find running policy here dies." That was it. No insults, no threats, just a sentence delivered like a verdict. Schultz laughed, loudly and proudly, playing to the room. He promised Bumpy death or submission. He promised Harlem would belong to him. And as Bumpy stood, finished his drink, and walked calmly out into the night, Schultz believed he'd won. Harlem knew better. By the time dawn crept over Harlem, the laughter from the Cotton Club had curdled into whispers. 6:23 a.m. A sanitation worker found a body tucked behind a warehouse, positioned so it wouldn't be missed. The man was one of Dutch Schultz's collectors, a familiar face in the neighborhood, and pinned to his coat was a simple note written in block letters. 1 down, 7 to go. Leave Harlem. The message moved faster than the police. By breakfast, every policy runner, bartender, and numbers banker in Harlem knew what had happened. By mid-morning, the news had reached the Bronx, where Schultz read the note and felt something he rarely felt. Uncertainty. He tried to dismiss it as coincidence, as a warning meant to scare him, but fear has a sound, and it echoed through his organization before he could silence it. Schultz ordered his men to find Bumpy Johnson immediately. Doors were kicked in, money was waved, threats were whispered and shouted. No one talked. Harlem had watched the insult at the Cotton Club. Harlem had heard the slurs, and Harlem understood that this wasn't just about territory anymore. It was about pride, about being treated like something less in front of the next day. Another body was found, another Schultz man dead in a different part of the city. Another note, 2 down, 6 to go. The pattern was undeniable now, 1 every day, clean and deliberate. Schultz doubled protection on his remaining operators, moved them from place to place, tried to hide them in plain sight. It didn't matter. Killers always seemed to know where to look, when to strike. Schultz's confidence began to crack. His men stopped joking. They stopped sleeping. Some begged to be reassigned. Others disappeared on their own. Harlem's streets buzzed with rumors, but Bumpy Johnson himself was nowhere to be seen. His policy banks were closed. His apartment was empty. It was as if he dissolved into the city itself, present only through the consequences he'd set in motion. By the third and fourth deaths, panic set in. The notes kept coming, counting down like a clock no one could stop. Schultz realized too late that killing Bumpy wouldn't end this, even if he could find him. This was bigger than one man now. It was a message written so publicly that the entire underworld was reading it together. Each death weakened Schultz's grip. Collectors stopped collecting. Runners stopped running. Harlem stopped cooperating. Fear did what guns and money couldn't. It erased his control. And as the days passed, Schultz understood the truth he'd mocked in that nightclub. When you insult a man like Bumpy Johnson in front of his people, you don't just create an enemy. You create a cause. By the fifth day, Dutch Schultz was no longer pretending. He was hiding. Curtains stayed closed in his Bronx headquarters. Guards doubled at every door, guns always in hand. 2 more of his men were dead by then, killed in different ways, different neighborhoods, same message pinned to their bodies. 5 down, 3 to go. The precision was what terrified him most. This wasn't chaos. This was control. Whoever was behind it knew his organization better than some of his own lieutenants. Schultz barked orders, demanded loyalty, promised protection, but fear had already hollowed his crew out. Men avoided eye contact. Some didn't show up at all. Harlem, meanwhile, was calm, too calm. People went about their days knowing exactly what was happening and why. No one celebrated openly, but there was a quiet understanding in the air. For the first time in months, Schultz's collectors weren't knocking on doors. His runners weren't shaking people down. His name, once spoken loudly, was now whispered like a warning. The power had shifted, not with a speech or a gunfight, but with patience and inevitability. The 6th and 7th deaths came fast. One in broad daylight, another behind locked doors that guards swore were secure. Each body carried the same truth. Protection meant nothing when the city itself turned against you. Schultz finally understood what he'd misjudged. He thought Harlem was territory. Bumpy Johnson understood it was community. And community, once united, was impossible to conquer. On the 7th night, the final man on the list was found dead. The last note was shorter than the rest. 8 down. Harlem belongs to Harlem. There was no celebration, no announcement. The killing didn't need explanation anymore. The message had been delivered in full. The next morning, Schultz ordered the retreat. Every operation shut down. Every man pulled out. Months of planning, money and blood, abandoned in silence. Dutch Schultz never set foot in Harlem again. He told people it was temporary. No one believed him. 2 days later, Bumpy Johnson reappeared. He walked down Lenox Avenue in daylight, unguarded, dressed neatly, nodding to people he passed. It was as if he'd never left. When reporters asked about the bodies, he shrugged. "I don't know anything about that," he said calmly. "But I'll say this, Harlem protects its own." A month later, Dutch Schultz was gunned down by other gangsters who decided he was too reckless to live, too loud, too careless. History remembered his death, but the underworld remembered something else. They remembered the night at the Cotton Club, the insult, the silence, the 7 days. From that moment on, things changed. White gangsters chose their words carefully. Respect became currency, because everyone knew the lesson written into New York streets in 1935. Power can laugh, threaten, and shout, but disrespect the wrong man in the wrong place, and time itself will collect the debt. 8 men paid it in a week, and Harlem never forgot.